In Texas, it is hot in the summertime. And in the summertime, we use our air conditioning a lot. We use it throughout the year, but certainly in the summertime, it's cycling on and off. Question has come
Heck
in.
yeah.
Why do my lights dim every time my air conditioning system comes on? What's happening there, Luke?
It's no good. It's no good. So
Hmm.
that's the air conditioning pulls a massive amount of power in order to get it started. So if you think about like a remember the not a Ferris wheel, what's the merry-go-round? What's the thing where
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, the
merry-go-round.
merry-go-round. Yeah.
Okay, so getting it started,
Oh, yeah.
right, and then once you're on, then you're getting dizzy and throwing up later. So that's the idea behind the compressor. The compressor on your air conditioning unit pulls a lot of power to get it going, to get that refrigerant moving around the system. That refrigerant goes all throughout the system, and it takes some oomph to get that thing rolling. Okay, once it's rolling, that startup power is done, then it chills out. But that startup power, if you don't have good wiring going to it, or if your power at your breakers or your breaker box, any of those spots are weak, then it takes it, you're going to see it really pull your voltage down, because there's this thing called Ohm's law. It's just a rule about electricity, but basically all it means is if you have higher amperage, you're going to be dropping down the voltage. Okay, so when the voltage drops down, the light's going to be, it's like a dimmer on
Mm.
stuff. It's not always a problem, but if it's consistently happening with this person, there could be a lot of electrical issues going on, and maybe even air conditioning going bad on them. Um, the older those motors get, they can pull a lot of power. And then on top of that, if there's not surge protection, if there's not good grounding, good wiring, if there's loose connections, it can really stack up on issues with their electrical system.
Luke, you brought up a good point. If in the past, when your air conditioning unit cranked up, the lights didn't dim, but they're beginning to now, maybe your AC system needs to be looked at by a qualified HVAC technician because it may be beginning to fail. And it's important to know that here in Texas for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a sign. It's pulling a lot of power. If it wasn't doing it before, now it is. It's pulling a lot of, and we have, I just saw one yesterday. It was we have a lot of these breaker panels called Challenger, and they they did not they're synonymous for that. They would have really weak aluminum type of bus bars, and then
Oh,
within 10-15 years, where the bus bar is where the breaker connects,
yep.
okay, that spot there would get really charred up and have a bad connection. And every time that air conditioning unit would kick on because it pulled a lot of power, it would get worse and worse and worse. And we have so many of those, and you'll hear that call, you'll understand what's going on. You go out there, it's like, yeah, it's the breaker panel. It because that really does cause some gnarly voltage and bad. It can it it it
Yeah.
can cause some hot spots throughout the system. Absolutely.
Yeah. And, something else, if you have an older home or a home with a circuit that's not designed for a portable air conditioning unit, maybe it's a window unit. Maybe it's on an addition to a house that you decided not to put the HVAC system in. Maybe it's in the garage or a shed.
Mhm.
Okay. It's likely that circuit isn't designed for that draw because when you're turning, especially a good sized window unit, you're looking at a problem if that outlet's not rated for the draw and you might break the breaker, right? It might trip.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Definitely any air conditioning unit or heating unit, they need to have a separate circuit. They just pull too much power. It's just going to cause too many issues. So if you're planning on having a window unit, don't just plug it into any plug around there. Have a dedicated circuit. Just trust me. I've seen too many issues caused when people try to plug it in with a branch circuit, one that's kind of branching
Yeah.
throughout the house to other outlets and whatnot, or lights and switches. Just have it dedicated. If it's a window unit or a mini split, a lot of people are adding mini splits these days with their
Yeah.
garages. Get a new circuit to it. Don't tap it on to the dryer or, you know, welder or whatever type of other circuit you're having.
Yeah.
Get a separate circuit for that, and just don't worry about it anymore.
It's great advice.
Ideas and things for him to think about, like the idea, the purpose of the circuit breaker is to protect the wiring. Okay. So if it has a 15 or 20 or 30, if it has a number on there, that's the amperage that breaker is set to. So the wire is connected to it, and that wire is only good for that certain amount of amperage. Well,
Mhm.
if it goes over that, it's supposed to kick off. Um, if there's a direct short, that's a drastic amount of amperage. Even the old cruddy, Federal Pacific breakers, even those, if you had direct shorts, they would kick off most of the time.
Yeah.
Not all the time, but the thing is, when you have appliances that are going bad, but not just directly shorting out, they might be pulling a lot of power. Then he could have a trip. Other things that will happen too is if water is getting inside of there, that can cause it to trip. And then even these newer breakers are extra sensitive. They could have bad newer appliances, like a lot of these dishwashers and stuff. Some of those can be causing it to trip, and the breaker actually can be glitching out on them. I've seen it too with these newer breakers. They have electronics inside of them. They call them arc faults and ground fault breakers. They have extra electronics inside of them, whereas the old ones just had springs and grease and oil and bimetals basically inside of them. Now these have computer chips, and I've seen where you had bad voltage coming in, causing the computer chips to go out, just like a surge would for any of your electronics. And then within about 3 or 4 years, these newer breakers can be glitching out and tripping off whenever it turns on the microwave or the dishwasher, and it can be inconsistent. So yeah, like it depends on what's going on. It's definitely not a good sign though. It definitely needs to be troubleshooted, but it would depend on the type of breaker and then what it is controlling. But the common things to look for is there storms going on when this happens? Is there, because I can tell you there's a bad voltage. Is the wiring condition good? Is it going underwater? Is it being chewed on by rodents, those type of things? And then maybe if it's a big appliance, then that's something that could be investigated too. Sometimes HVAC units have motors inside of them, and they'll once the compressor kicks on, they'll trip the breaker, and that's a direct short. So the breaker's doing its job there; it's protecting. So yeah, that'll give them some things to investigate and kind of have a guideline on. But yeah, there is a lot of variables on that question.
Assuming that the wiring was installed right, the receptacles were installed right, and the breaker was installed right in the panel. In other words, everything like, the wire gauge was in sync with the breaker. Everything is copacetic when it was installed, house was built. If there's a problem now, it needs to be rectified immediately because it could cause a problem. It could burn your house down.
No, that's real. And like I've seen it a bunch where people maybe they couldn't afford a new air conditioning unit at the time, and so they get a window unit or a
Mhm.
space heater, and
Mm.
that's a massive amount of power on that circuit, and the house was not wired for that. I've seen that so many times. It's sad because the folks are really trying to just get by, but not having the repairs done when it needs to be done can cause other issues that can stack up on the system. So I've seen that a lot. So they may have too much appliances, they may have other things plugged in, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of variables to it.
Luke, isn't it true today that the code in Texas, as far as I know, now I'm not an electrician, you are, but if you build a home today, the refrigerator needs to be on its own circuit, and the washing machine and the dryer, those two need to be on their own. Is that true?
There's a few exceptions.
Okay.
So if you really want to nerd out on it, we could, that would take too long. But that's the standard practice. Yes, there are a few exceptions, but yes, that just makes it easy for everyone. You get a quick green tag when you do it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And you see,
absolutely.
years ago, electricity may have been relatively new to us, and we would plug anything into any outlet. I grew up in
Yeah,
old houses, and
sure,
there wasn't dedicated lines for refrigerators. When that electrical system and panel was put in the house, um, refrigerators weren't, considered. Air conditioning may not have even been considered because like some of these homes were really, really old. I actually lived
sure.
in a home that predated electricity. It was built in 1775. There was no so they had to bring it in at some point. So it's really safer today, I think. You build a new house in 2024 and it's tight. Like everything in that house is tight. The efficiency of the home and certainly the utilities, the plumbing is different today. Might be they're using PEX and the electrical system is just going to be like literally screwed down right. And it's important. Luke, as always,
And
thank you so much for being an expert here on the show.
absolutely. I was going to add something to
Mhm.
that you were saying. If you do have an older house and you're adding a fridge or a microwave, or maybe you want to have a mounted microwave, We see that, or car charge, it just, if you're plugging that into a regular wall plug, there's an adapter, it would work, but it's going to put a massive amount of load on your system. So if you are adding, if you have an older house and you're adding an appliance or something, then that's definitely, you need to get a new